The chairs are coming up, so one of them three speakers. Okay, good morning, everybody. I think we're about a full house. I'm sure there'll be some more people straggling in. Probably won't be the last. I'm Adam Farquhar. I'm head of digital scholarship here at the British Library. And what do we do? Sort of with colleagues across the library, we're kind of working on confronting the changes and the impacts that digital information and services have on the practice of scholarship and research, and we're trying to make sure that the library is positioned to address those in the coming years. So it was kind of an interesting, it's an interesting time to be here and to be at a library. It's probably the most exciting time in the last certainly 250 years. Maybe it's the last, 1,500, I'm not sure, but definitely the last 250. We have to figure out how to do things and how to have these sorts of discussions to look forward to see what's coming as well. Right? We're trying to establish a set of forums, and this is the first of them, where we look at topics like this, where we have a chance to step back and reflect a little bit and become part of a broader conversation that includes not just colleagues at the library, but also folks in the broader world. And I'd like to thank Frode Kempen for bringing ideas for this forum to us. So this, I think, started with a discussion that Frode and Ann Coleman at the Science, Technology, and Medicine here at the library had. It was last year's Science Online. And it's kind of built, and I think I've been really, really excited and looking forward to the forum today, because I think it's an opportunity to have a really, really interesting conversation that we brought together with a set of really influential and productive thinkers who have had tremendous influence over the decades, and some interesting and provocative thinkers from the library as well, and looking forward to see how the discussion and interchange goes. I'd like to thank Nora, who's Nora in the back there. She made everything happen today, so thanks, Nora. That was quite a bit of work. Nora's from the digital curation and research team, which is part of the digital scholarship department here at the library. I'd also like to thank our panelists, some at the table and some in the front row here, for being willing to come into the library to engage in this discussion with us. So thanks much for that, and also to our colleagues for daring to kind of sit next to them, because lovely folks, but really thanks to all of you for showing up. And I'd like to highlight this. So this is a discussion. It's not going to be 14 hours and then presentations. All right. The structure of the day, we're going to divide it up into 3 short sessions with a kind of discussion period between each one. In each session, we're going to have 3 speakers. They're going to come up and they're going to talk for about 5 minutes. Okay. So that's quite quick. It's quite hard to say something focused, clear, in 5 minutes, so it's quite a challenge. And then we're going to open up for discussion. So amongst the panelists, with contribution from everybody, it's a discussion more than a Q&A. We're talking about the future of text. There aren't any right answers, right? Nobody has a pure vision as to what's going to happen. Some of us will end up being lucky, and some less lucky, but we won't be able to tell today which ones those will be. So responsibilities, panelists, provoke us, audience, question, engage, advance the discussion. As I think Frode wanted to cast this as a symposium. If it had been my choice, we would have done it in the evening. We would have had a glass of wine, and we would have had a bite to eat and drink together, a bit like man does with their top science events.
Or coffee.
Or coffee, yeah. But we'll do the best with a little bit of coffee and the morning time period that we've got today. All right? So this first session is going to include, we'll start out with Vince Cerf, who was Vice President and Chief Evangelist for the Internet at Google, and co-inventor of developer of TCP/IP, and many people say, the father of the Internet. So without that work then and the foresight that it had, the world would be a very different place today. And we'll throw Helmut, Director of Liquid Information, makers of interactive text, and then Leanne Coleman, Head of Science, Technology, Medicine here at the British Library. So I won't do a longer introduction. It could go extremely long. We are much more interested in what you have to say than what we can say about you. So it's an honor to have you here. And,
if you don't mind, I am going to let's speak ex cathedra, as it were. First of all, thank you very much for arranging this. This is the kind of discussion I live for, so I'm really looking forward to the interaction. Point number one on the future of text: words carry meaning, and they aren't going away. So text will be with us. It's very important. Second, text has the nice property that machines can work with text, and that means that we can take computer programs and use them to augment wetware in the processing of words and text. So I think that's important too. Third thing about text, and generally the notion of capturing things in word form, is that it allows you to have conversations with the past and the future. If you write a book or a document and it's preserved, then that document becomes your message to the future, and the person in the future is getting information from the past. Of course, the dialogue is Socratic and often in your head, because you may not be able to span the 250 or 2,500 years between the writing of the document and the time that you're interacting with it. Now I have to put my glasses on because I can't read my own handwriting. One of the things that I see happening in this online environment is that text is becoming a part of very much more complex objects. So when we use software to create things, they are much more complex than the kinds of things we've created in the past. If you use spreadsheets, if you use presentation software, if you make use of word processing programs, increasingly the objects contain not only text, but many other media as well. And so text is being immersed into and connected with and sort of immersed into much more complex objects, for which we need computers to render. So if you don't have the software that can render these complex objects, the complex objects are just a bag of useless bits. And I am very worried about this. The rant is called bit rot. I won't repeat it here, but I am worried about the preservation of the software that allows us to understand and appreciate the meaning of these complex objects which contain the text, among other things. There's this movement from the physical to the digital, and it has the side effect that that which was once fixed, the notion of copyright in here is fixed, something fixed in a particular medium. Is this significant? This is the mechanism to tell you your time is up. This notion of fixing something in a medium, which is sort of fundamental to many copyright laws, is lost in the digital world because that digital representation is potentially malleable. The consequence of this is that the notion that we have of a work may change with time because it is malleable and because it can be adapted. John McCarthy, who's a very well-known computer scientist at Stanford University and one of the founders of artificial intelligence, once said to me in a conversation about digital libraries, 100 years from now, they will be saying, did you know that 100 years ago they had books that didn't talk to each other? And so this notion that that which we capture in text is not necessarily fixed, and is not only malleable by us, but may even be malleable by the objects in which they have been captured because the objects are active, I find to be at least an intriguing notion. The idea that something updates itself because it's connected to the rest of the information universe is rather exciting. It's also a little scary because when I read books, I often have a spatial memory of where something was in the book. Oh, that's the page with the mustard stain on it in the upper left-hand corner. That is lost in the online environment in two ways. One, the malleable nature of the text, and the other one is that depending on the size and format of the thing you read it on, the notion of page starts to disappear as well. So I submit to you that one of the challenges that we have collectively is going to be a transformation from the page number and paragraph and citation to some other way of representing where in a text we want to draw attention, because the fixed presentation form will no longer be the guide for that format.
Where is when?
So, sir?
Where and when in the
Yeah.
text?
So here we are. I think I'll stop there. That probably used up, if not all my 5 minutes, close to it, and I'm much more interested in hearing what other people have to say and engaging in discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I now have to rewrite my whole presentation. I'll start, let me see if we have the right monitor. We don't. Let me just.
So you're actually putting slides up.
Yeah, just.
Haven't you heard that power corrupts and PowerPoint corrupts absolutely?
My memory's not as good as yours. There we go. Right. So I'll make the quite obvious thing that the future of text is digital, and an important aspect of digital text is interactivity. Tiny little footnote there is things on paper will always be around, will always be important, but that's kind of the past into the future. And this is really the point, and Vince said it much more eloquently. Text is important. I know this is the British Library and we're all interested in text, but let's remember that it is an important thing, and we should therefore make the reading experience as powerful as possible. So, Vince, you hinted to multimedia and adding other things to make the text more powerful. And yes, that's absolutely a very important element to this. But pre-prepared multimedia supports the point of the author. It's a very flashy way to get a specific point across, because it doesn't support its analysis, simply because multimedia components do what the designer said they could do and what the writer said they should do. It doesn't do everything in the world. By the way, if you disagree with any of these provocative things, please do say so.
I disagree.
So if we just look briefly at kind of the knowledge work process, and this is just a kind of abstracted way of doing it. If you don't agree with exactly everything, it doesn't matter, it's a very rough thing. We'll find that most of it up there is about reading, and then there's this tiny thing down here, which is about the authoring and the publishing. You know, look at all the power we have for authors. We have creation of links, copy, paste, word processing, text formatting, speech to text, multimedia. And the reader today in the digital world has clicking on handmade, pre-made links, and the ability to copy, but not everywhere. In history, most of the effort has just gone there to help the reader. Pleasant views, that's been it. All of these other parts of the knowledge work process, the finding of information, really seriously reading, the active analysis, which requires a lot of different things, the discussion with other people, and the publishing, that's kind of been ignored. And most people, when they talk about the future, they talk about the top two, getting more stuff. But what about all these other things? These are just some ideas of what can be done with it, but there is serious scope for augmentation throughout this whole knowledge work process. And to really, again, point out the obvious, reading is not passive, it's an interactive process, so therefore interactivity is very, very important. And Vint, you've stolen my thunder here, because I would say the amazing thing is that the written word is inherently interactive, and that is the key point you just made earlier too. That is just so explosively important. Anyone have any questions on that before I move on? It's such a big deal. You can do things with text. And we're not talking about the iPad, for instance. Most of the text on the iPad, if you read a magazine on the iPad, it's an image. So It's not text in terms of interact. You can't interact with any of it. It's a huge step back. It's absolutely disgusting in my mind. So, because of these kind of obvious steps, to me it leads up to, I personally feel that an important aspect of the future of text is to unleash this inherent interactability. I use the term liquid, to make the system, the text, and the user more liquid. I'll show you a little bit of what I mean by that, some ideas, but first, let's talk about the state of the art. On tablet books, you can get references if you press really hard on a word, like a child going, I want that one. That's what you can get. And some of them you can copy. You can't even copy on all of them. I can't remember the Kindle, the iBook, one of them. On the web, you can click on a handmade, Ted, you must be fuming, because obviously we use the word hypertext for the web. It isn't. Just like that to make sure everyone understands.
It's a trivial case.
Very trivial case. And what makes me really angry is it's pre-made. You have a whole long page of stuff, and then the author arrogantly decided that this one word, you click on it, it opens up one other thing. I mean, seriously. What about the rest of the words? And you can copy. That's about it. If you're looking at the basic functions of the web browser, that's it. I would go so far and to say that the web browser is the biggest bottleneck between the human mind and knowledge the world has ever seen. So just to show an example of other ways to do things. For instance, if you have a big, heavy chunk of text, why can't you just say, no, I have space on my screen. Open it, let it flow, let it, break it up nicely so I can read this thing. We don't have the constraints of the printed page. Why shouldn't I, as the reader, do whatever I want? And also, not everyone in the whole world are native English speakers. Come across the word augmenting. Well, what does that mean in Chinese? Oh, okay. Technically trivial. Just make it happen. I'll show you how, with the research and the systems that we work with, this is how we make it happen. I'll show you the kind of interface. You select text and nothing at all different happens in any way. But if you then choose to move the cursor, you get this tiny little liquid water drop icon thing. And if you choose to point to that, you then get a menu of options. So for example, British Library, we can point to the beautiful, colorful Google icon there and do a search. And let's say we wanted to look up links. We just click on the Wikipedia icon and find out all kinds of interesting things. When we're done, click outside to go back. Numbers are, of course, interactable as well. It recognizes it's a number. Click on a button, it converts from dollars to pounds. Here we have Chinese characters, translate them into English. It's just not difficult. And that's kind of a dummy down system, but I just wanted to show you that there are lots of other options beyond that. Because an important part of making things interactive is that you have the powerful augmentation on one side. You should have a huge vocabulary of things to do. But the stuff you do all the time should be really, really simple. So that's what this is trying to balance out. And that's a liquid perspective. Before I sit down, any questions?
Yes. I think about text and conveying meaning, and I think about images and diagrams and how powerful they can be. And even though I'm in love with text, it occurs to me from time to time when I'm trying to understand a problem, I often discover I need to draw on myself a picture of that problem to get a more gestalt understanding. So it's very clear that text is not the sole conveyor of semantic meaning. And I'm a little curious now to try to figure out how do we conflate text plus these other methods of conveying understanding.
A short comment on that, because one thing I planned to talk about today, I decided not to. You brought it up earlier. Your mustard stain is gone. And I think that's hugely important. When you look at the collection here at the British Library of original manuscripts with notes in the margin and all of that, and my wife, she complains she's reading a book, she doesn't know where she is. Oh, suddenly it's over. These are hugely important things. We need to develop resources to developing very rich document formats to get as much as that back. When you're in the middle of this, the fact that you can convert dollars to pounds, nice. But if you want to have a chart over time, there's no reason you shouldn't have that put into it on the text. Very important point. Yes?
With
comments made me think of a project that I've been involved with, but where we were looking at things like Wonder Wheel, which you had done. So Wonder Wheel, for those of you who never tried it, is where you put in a search term in Google, and then instead of then trying to think, well, that didn't get what I wanted, I'm going to try something else, you look at the Wonder Wheel, and it will link to all the different things that that other people searched for that Google thought was related. And it was really cool, and I'm not quite sure why you phased it out.
Maybe not enough people used it. I don't know the answer, but I will go find out.
But what I've been doing with a project that I was hoping to launch it today, but I deleted 2 months of work yesterday at 3 o'clock.
By accident?
By accident. It said, do you know you're about to reset some settings? And I thought I was just resetting one lot of settings. I ended up resetting the entire formatting for my entire website, and there is no backup. Anyway, I didn't want to. So we can all, somebody can buy me a beer later. But the point is, what we were trying to do is connect technology. So we were trying to show how physics leads into electronics, and electronics leads into mobile devices, and show how these connections, they're not necessarily, they're directional, right? So physics gives a lot to electronics. Electronics doesn't necessarily give that much back, you know? So you have things that enable, things that are applications. What we found, however, from looking at, and there are loads of these visualizations out there, ways of connecting ideas, connecting music, connecting all sorts of things. The problem is that the AI, as far as I can see, and I work at Imperial College and I have lunch with AI researchers every day, the AI is not there yet. The AI is not there yet, though. And so what we're doing is we're doing it by hand.
Yeah.
So every news, so it's a news site, every news story that we tag, we say, okay, this story is about nanotechnology, but the application of the nanotechnology is solar cells, and physics and chemistry are leading into so that then you get rich pages, or if you go to the physics page, you can find this on the nanotech, and you start, so we have all sorts of ideas, but the technology, as far as I can see, to do that really well, what they used to call, I don't know if they still do, I'm a bit out of the loop, they used to call the semantic web. I don't think it's there yet.
No, it's not.
Oh, we should go on for our next presenter, but save that thought for the next Q&A. This is the end.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's slightly daunting to be here today in front of colleagues, but also rather important guests, but I'm going to do my best. So, in thinking about text, it's quite hard for a scientist not to settle on those 4 letters, C-A-G-T, that have really come to symbolize this sort of brave new world of science. The human genome was sequenced only 10 years ago now, and many of us will have seen those letters displayed in all kinds of ways when we're thinking about, you know, us as human beings, and somehow that's a representation of us as human beings. But how many of us actually understand or could read those letters? You know, they apparently mean us, but you know, we can't read them. There's just 4 letters there. But I think there's some other analogies between genetics and science in a way, and text and how we think about language that I'd just like to put before you as a bit of food for thought. When we deciphered the genetic code, we felt probably we've discovered the answer to the mystery of being humans. Oh, now we know everything. We can find out what genes are responsible for disease. We can find out what genes are responsible for development, how our brain works, etc. But in reality, our genetic code doesn't account for everything about us. So-called epigenetics, the things sort of surrounding genetics, our environment, not just the environment that we develop in ourselves and find ourselves in, but in fact even the environment of the cell in which the genetic code is transcribed into proteins can influence how that is actually, how that emerges, how it develops. And I think similarly it can be quite difficult to separate out the meaning in text as characters that we're also familiar with from the culture, from the environment in which we are also embedded. So that's a little kind of bit of food for thought around that. I think Vince said earlier something about our history, message to the future, and our genes absolutely present they represent our past. Some really fascinating work being done about the influence of our grandparents on our current physiology, for example. But they also represent our future. So just as text represents our past and transmits something to the future generations. So there's a lot of focus at the moment in science on data, on those sort of individual letters, individual figures, numbers, etc. But if we can't translate them or transform them into something that's actually meaningful for us, can those strings of letters, can all those numbers actually ever really be useful? And I think there is something very profound about the dialogue that is required in science, as in all other areas of life, that is essential. So one of the things I think we need to remember is in those letters, the CATG, there's a vast amount of knowledge. If only you could read it, there's a vast amount of knowledge underlying each of those letters. So I think the future of text is one where we can peel away some of those layers, perhaps in a liquid way, and reveal levels of meaning that are actually in context that's right for us. So whether we're a scientist or an artist or an historian, or indeed a child or an adult, that will reveal the meaning behind that and make sense for us.
So my first reaction is that you should title this talk DNA Meets DNS. That's a little geeky, but I find it very disturbing that my ribosomes are smarter than I am, because they can interpret those letters and I don't know what they mean. It's a sort of humbling experience to recognize that. There was a hand up over there. There we go.
Sort of following on from what Diane was saying there, we have an obvious awareness of the dangers of losing biodiversity and slightly less awareness, but a strong awareness of losing cultural diversity. But if you're mixing up contexts, an example there would be the translation of the word augmentation. So it immediately took a word without knowing too much about the context of the word, and it just here it is in Chinese characters. Isn't there a danger of losing semantic diversity? For the semantic web to work properly, there has to be some standardization of meaning, albeit with some very sophisticated ways of defining context. But ultimately, for it to work, there has to be some form of universal understanding of what it means. And is that not really dangerous for the future of information?
Or translations in that as well. Because once you have full uniformity, you no longer have information.
And you have only one way of saying something, or only one way of interpreting something.
Well, I think the way that the internet has contributions in translations from its own populace enables that to actually evolve over time and actually keep translations in line with cultural changes.
So statistical translation has really changed the shape of machine translation in the past 10 years. It wasn't really working very well before, and now you've got a massive corpus of EU documents plus a whole load of stuff on the internet. So yeah, I think that's a very good point. And so maybe that's the answer to this problem of semantic diversity.
But it has to be policed.
I'm sorry, someone else was talking first.
Sorry, I was just saying it has to be policed. You've got the Googles and various other people who are monitoring these translations, but you have to make sure that it is truly transparent, so that there aren't people tuning translations into ways in which they might have other intentions for.
Well, I'm sure many people in this room must know that the translations that we do at Google, which I consider to be pretty good quality on the whole, are statistically generated by this corpus of documents that purport to be the same thing that we translated by native speakers, for example. But we also know that this is still an imperfect art. I remember early attempts at doing translation by pouring the dictionary into the computer and then putting out something in English, translating it into Russian, then translating it back to English. My favorite example was out of sight, out of mind, came back invisible idiot.
And there's a restaurant in China which tries to put up a sign of the restaurant in English which reads translation server error.
Yeah, I have an example. That's really funny. So how many people have heard the term augmented reality? Something that's popping around. Okay, so I saw an example of this in San Diego, demonstrated by the chairman of Qualcomm, who showed up with a mobile with his camera pointed to a Korean restaurant menu. And the image of that menu was reflected in the camera, but plainly the instrument is able to talk to the internet. So it sent the image to a place that interpreted the text and overlaid it with the translation. It overlaid the Korean value with transformation into US dollars. And so he was demonstrating how we could take the world around us and use the images of the world and our ability to do optical character recognition and everything else, and augment our understanding by reaching out to computing resources and applying it right there in the field of view. And I found that one of the more compelling examples of what's now technically possible.
Google Goggles, I think, is good.
I'm sorry?
Google Goggles, it's an application.
An example of that, yes, precisely. So where do we want to go with this discussion?
Any further questions, or move on to the next section?
Is it questions or discussion? I don't think this should be limited to questions.
No, discussion. I
Yeah,
mean,
right, that's what-
absolutely.
yes.
How do you
Well,
define text?
I'm sorry.
How do you define text?
Text,
Anybody?
how do you define
Text?
text?
Yeah, what's the definition of text?
Well, I always thought it was a string of characters.
So was that text, all those CGATs, that was text?
Yes.
Even though they didn't, okay, just curious. Are
The
symbols?
thing is, you could
She
only
thinks
represent an
it's
image
text.
file using ASCII, for example. So would that make images text as well? I was thinking about it. I mean, DNA kind of is text because we use letters. And it turns out it has grammar when you analyse it statistically as well. So it's not random noise. Obviously, there's lots of information there. But if you take that analogy too far, then audio is text as well, because you just render audio as an ASCII stream, and then all numbers are text, and then all text is numbers. So I think you quite quickly run into a situation where you don't know what's going on.
Hang on,
So-
text is a kind of a carrying mechanism, right? It can carry garbage, right? So when we look at, it can be just absolute noise, nonsense text. But obviously, Marlon, that's not where you're going. You're more about what is useful.
I think there's a clear difference between a symbol and text, right? And I think I would say that DNA actually falls into the category of using letters that were normally used for text as symbols. And so I personally wouldn't classify it as
But there's
text.
a grammar, there is a grammar
Or you
for
could use
that.
anything, yeah.
There's a grammar for that set of symbols that shows up in DNA. They're very well defined grammar. We understand how to interpret that. It turns into proteins.
But I think what we mean by text is language, as in terms of the language that we commonly use. I mean, even arbitrary tags, a password. Would you consider a password to be text, where you're asked to put in a random string? I wouldn't call that text. I just say that's a symbol that I have to put in to get access. It could have been a fingerprint, right? That the text itself is not relevant to its usefulness.
So I'm willing to accept the symbol argument. I will not accept, however, the argument that the DNA sequence is not text, and the reason is that it has a grammar. As long as there's a grammar, just because it's not natural language does not make it not text.
It's not a spoken natural language, but it's the most natural language in the world.
In some
Yeah,
aspects.
but
I wonder if I
physics has a
could
grammar.
bring us
Yeah.
back to a previous point that Fred is.
Prime numbers have grammar. So lots of things have grammar if we're going to use grammar.
Yeah.
So it turns out if you feed DNA if you feed sequences into the stuff that we use to analyse to analyse languages, we get stuff, we get things that look like grammatical structures. But I think there are probably quite a lot of things you
So
can do.
I think this is a good example of something where there's a common sense center for the definition, right? Where most people would recognize certain things as text. And then there's a lot of edge cases, and you can go down lots of routes to explore edge cases. But in some sense, I guess I'm a little bit more interested in the kind of the core and the way it evolves what might happen with it. I wanted to come back to, so we should draw a halt shortly and move on to the next set of speakers, but I wanted to go back to something that Frode was talking about the arrogance of the author selecting what relationships and connections should be made. And I'm just sort of, this is sort of an interesting thing, because actually, in some sense, that's what authors do. They pick the words, they string them together, they select the thoughts that they're expressing, and it's clear that there's, that's to some extent driven by the nature of print and paper, right? But to some extent, it has to do with the nature of the creative act. And so I think there's a question as to whether, we see changes in the way the creative act is, and our feeling about that, or whether actually that's just right and that's the way it is.
If I can just, the whole, just to kind of go all the way back to Marlene's question, I think Marlene's question is actually about the work. It is crucial. My wife out there, Emily, asked when working on all this stuff, was cave paintings text?
Hieroglyphic.
No, I mean, and then obviously the answer for me was no. And then I was like, hang on, there's a grammar, something's going on. It's certainly symbolic, right? So when Pink asked the question of, text is fine, but what about all the pictures I wanted to, symbols, Sony's language, it's all about symbols. How do we merge them into the future? If we stay with ASCII for the next 1,000 years, we've got a problem. Right?
Well, in particular, you better stay with Unicode instead of ASCII. There are a lot of other people who will be, or can't be, if it's only ASCII.
As a beginning, yes.
Just the last comment, and then we'll move on to the next.
It's possible that maybe we should look not at the text as a whole big blob of things, but and especially for the role of the author versus the reader and technology versus intervention of text that is more story related versus factual information. I mean, what the text conveys, whether it's a recipe, whether it's a story, whether it's a new story, that's the relationship between reader and author, between what they can both do, what the technology can do, whether it should be some human intervention for tagging, whatever, is a different problem.
Our next session is starting with Keith Martin, who's senior lecturer in publishing at University of Arts London History, and he's also technical editor of MacUser Mag. And then he'll be followed by Matthew Shaw. Everyone knows him, curator of North American History at the British Library. And everyone must know that. What you do now. And Tom Standage. Everybody knows Tom Standage. Editor of Economist Online and author of The Victorian Internet. So, thank you.
Okay, hi. Right, I wanted to look at this sort of future of text from a slightly different point of view, to take sort of the designer's angle. Typography is important. We're talking about text, but also the way we actually show it is important. Typography is more, or rather, proper typography is important. So just a quick look at the appearance of the information that we work with. So type or typography, it is a visual language. It sort of lays on top of the information that we work with. And it gives us another communications channel. So it's an important component in how we communicate. It influences how something's perceived. There are many examples of this. And we can get things right, we can get things wrong. We get the tone of voice right, the tone of voice of the typography, the way that we choose our type and how it's set. And we can enhance the message. We get it wrong and we undermine the message. Very simple examples, the classic stop sign. This is partly because that's the type we're used to, but it's a very clear, carefully designed and chosen typeface. So if we use something different, so it's a very, very dramatic, obvious example. Then we look at typefaces most people actually assume are pretty much the same. Oh yeah, how many typefaces can there possibly be? 100, 200, 50, whatever. I co-authored a book a little while back called 1,000 Fonts, and that really only scratched the surface. It was great fun doing, but it was holding me for a while. These fonts, a lot of people glancing at them when they're set, they assume they're the same, but you can see how dramatically different they can be. So, is choosing the right font important? I mean, of course it is. But there are so many options out there.
Yeah.
Which one works?
Yeah.
Which would you be more inclined to go to if this was an invitation? So,
Some of those
typography.
look like the Spanish Inquisition.
Yes,
So for some kind of party.
you definitely leave on the doormat. Okay, so typography is important, and type design, it's influenced by the media that we use and the methods of the time. So print has been around for a long, long time. Digital delivery is a lot newer, obviously. The different methods of creating the marks on paper or whatever it is we're using influence how people design the type and how they use the type. A very quick example, Bell Centennial, this is purely print. Bell Centennial took over from Bell Gothic, which was typeface used in North American telephone directories. The previous design was created for a particular printing method, and then that printing method changed. So it started to work less and less well. They were blocking up or they were dropping out characters. So Bell Centennial was designed specifically for a new printing method. So it's type design for a method and a medium. Type used to be designed for specific different sizes. Same typeface, created for body text or created for headlines. This is, we're generally told, no longer done. Although it has been done to an extent. We've had a sort of a little flurry over the past, say, decade and a half of specific bitmap created fonts. Again, fonts created for a particular size. But the whole tone of voice and sort of period. So type is, it's like clothes our information wear. And fashion and clothes, it has very much of a period feel. So you can identify and you get a certain message across from the way you actually choose to dress your information. So traditional, very much of a period. There is actually an anachronistic mistake here, which I know about. I mean, this is 18th century, that type is actually 200 years earlier, but it feels right. Wondered if anyone else would spot that. The biggest type geek here at the moment. Okay, through to, say, 1950s, 1960s, the clothes indicate the period. So does the graphic style, and so does the choice of typeface. Designed in 1957, Madman was set very end of the 50s into the early 60s, and it was a very popular font in advertising at the time. No nonsense, period accurate, strong and clear sans serif. Then we have other examples of very sort of rooted in its time pieces of type. So, digital publishing, new abilities and new restrictions. One of the restrictions we've had for a long time in digital display is the resolution of screens. So pixels are the building blocks of screens, so we saw that bitmap typeface. But we have, this is improving. So with what Apple calls the Retina display, which in their language means a display with the pixels so small you can't really make them out. This projector is kind of making a meal of that. That's supposed to look worse than that. This is a clearer example. That is approximately a third of the resolution of the sharper type. And that is the approximate difference between your average screen today and the screen on the iPhone 4. So it means that we're moving towards a period where we don't have to worry about low resolution really mucking up the way type looks. We also have the problem of the flexible nature of digital information reflowing. So we have information where the reader is in charge. So from a design point of view, is that a disaster? No, it's another challenge that people need to actually accommodate. So designing for ebooks, you have less control, which to a traditional designer is, I can't, we need control. No, it's just part of the challenge, what we have to deal with. So, probably running out of time, just wanted to leave you with that thought. The message really is behind that, good typography is invisible.
One question. Do you have a reaction as a reader, I'm sorry, as an author?
Yep.
Do you have a reaction to a reader who has the ability to change the font, change the layout, do other things to something you've produced?
Generally, I don't really mind, although there are very few ways that a reader can really change things at the moment. I think that in most cases, readers don't want to go as far as changing the layout themselves. You can have intelligent layout adjustments, so with CSS where you have a narrower or broader window that will reflow, but I think most readers are, their primary interest is what's the information. Now, they should be given every ability to make it easier for them to get that information.
There's a big argument that's gone on for ages about whether the author should have absolute control over presentation or whether the reader should have some flexibility. I'm on that side. Particularly because I've gotten older and I have to wear glasses, I'd like to increase the font. So
absolutely, it's arrogance to just refuse to allow that.
There are more and more pages in unreadably small sans serif type, which is harder to read, which cannot be narrowed. So that in order to see to read both sides of the page, I must swab back and forth across the page with the bottom slider. This is outrageous.
Yes, it's an example of arrogance. Mentioned the point about sans serif type. There's sort of the idea that serif type is easy to read in body text. There's been some interesting studies that kind of throw that it's kind of debunked, but not. It's a question now. It seems that we read most easily the type that we grew up with, or that we're most used to. Some industries use sans serif for most of the documents, and they tend to find that really easy to deal with. So,
well, let's leave the next questions till after the next
two. Do one or two, but let's.
Thanks. Can't bring back fonts there, I'm afraid. Yeah, I'm delighted to. Well, I'm quite pleased the print is still with us. Not least because my book is out today. Finally, the world can know what the French Republican calendar was all about during the French Revolution. But weirdly, what I was most excited about was the arrival of the looking site at Amazon. For some reason, that was the funnest bit, even more interesting than seeing the actual object. But I don't know what that means, but I just sort of leave it there as a starting point. Then I'm going to talk for 5 minutes, and I'm being audio glued, so that should keep me to 5 minutes of stop off after that. About the humanities in general, what can humanities offer to this debate? And we've already seen what typography has to say, what can contribute anyway. Now, the humanities must surely contribute something. Seeing as scholars have made it their business to work with texts, creating, transcribing, and editing them. Here's an example of the monastic library from the Hypercard computer game for the Mac, Monks for Macs, or Macs for Monks. The monastic library there from the, I think, late 80s, early 90s. And the humanities have spent their time developing the scholarly apparatus of citations, indices, dictionaries, glossaries, thesauri, and so on. Also the machinery to tame this massive text, to control, assess, and analyse it. Scholars can retrace one another's work,
much as scientists have to make their experiments repeatable. And libraries have laboured alongside scholars in this process, creating library catalogues and helping to create encyclopedias, and this great work of ordering knowledge and text, which is reliable and referable. And this is a tradition which has been continued today in the text encoding initiative to bring right up to date, putting text online, which in itself has contributed to the development of XML and the ability to add extra data, metadata to text. And within this world, the written world has reigned supreme. And there is Jacques Derrida, I'm going to bring in briefly to this debate. And in an essay in Rousseau, which is possible to understand, or hard to understand, but is about the shift from the oral to the written, to the fixed, to the stable, he claims there is nothing outside the text. And this goes back to our earlier debate, what is the text? For Derrida and many others, texts refer to other texts, shaped particularly within their own context. And they're only to be understood through text. This creates all sorts of philosophical and metaphysical problems. Derrida also has a definition of text, and he actually pins it down, which is quite unusual. Text is everywhere there is a relation to another thing, or relation to other. In this way, we might think of text not just as written marks, but also audio, video, and performance, and also the way these marks and events relate to one another. One might also read culture in total as his text. Now, Derrida's thought here had a profoundly unsettling effect on humanities in the 1970s and 1990s. And here I want to perhaps draw some parallels between wider trends in literature and history and politics and so forth, and perhaps hypertext itself and the way the web works together and the way you begin to think about things. It overthrew old ways of working. It privileged the web of things, perhaps in the same way that Google has cut through the old library way of organising things, standardised and authoritative and handcrafted links. Postmodern texts themselves played with the relation of texts and the modes of their production, offering perhaps an echo of the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of hypertext. Text which does not form a single sequence and which may be read in various orders. Pynchon and Auster, to take two examples of literary writers, have created works whose own referentiality and loops of meaning and playing with a form in the end undermine their own ability to create meaning, and everything becomes a game. Or to quote Moe from The Simpsons, in an episode in which Moe goes to college and redecorates his bar in the Pomo postmodern style, weird for the sake of weird. It seems as though the cultural turn, the shift to the postmodern, has had its day somewhat, at least in humanities nowadays. We can speculate for the reasons. Foreign wars, for example, perhaps concentrate the minds on what is truth and what are people really dealing with. There's been a return to the narrative in historical writing. Run out of 5 minutes, but I'm coming to the end. Yes, so a return to the narrative, to the serial, both in literature and also in historical writing. Analysis and playing with the form is perhaps less encouraged as it once was in the 80s and 90s. But more than this, and drawing towards some conclusions, the influence of digital humanities and also the tools and the technologies available have created a turn away from the linguistic and the cultural, but perhaps towards the data. There's been works such as Google's Ngrams, as an example of hypertext versus text, and hypertext on the bottom doesn't tell us very much in this graph, but other people have used it to look at the way in which, well, I saw one yesterday, which people were using the way people looked at teachers, whether they were respected or not respected over the last 20 years, and these are being used by historians and literary scholars, people like Franco Moretti, in analysing vast numbers of text all at once. Projects like the Old Bailey Online and Connected Histories have also created vast amounts of data which enables historians and others to ask new questions and get automated responses, forcing them to think about the questions they ask as much as the research that they do. And then finally, I was just wondering about the way in which the web is changing. We're moving perhaps from this postmodern web of referentiality, of the hypertext, towards one of perhaps semantic meaning, semantic connections, but also older forms. We were talking about the iPad, and the way in which magazines are very much the old static forms within them. And these, of course, are outside the web. They are on the internet, but they're not using HTTP to share their data. But one place where these older forms, and thinking back to the monastic library and the library's work, perhaps we call it the hypotext, the stuff that lies beneath the text itself, is an example here of Twitter, which actually is showing how text is continuing into modern form. And this is an analysis or a representation of the metadata of a tweet. And it's interesting the way in which a tweet has an idea, 140 characters, but it also has its own citation. It often privileges referring to other people much in the same way that indices and references used to. So the old methods of scholarship are still there, just in a new form. And perhaps the library has a place to pay in all this stuff hidden behind, underneath, still working. So where once there were old card catalogues, we need to provide the preservation for these things. Maybe the name authority is going back to some of the semantic web questions about how to refer to things, the copyright and the other sort of underlying legal frameworks, but also a place to think and deal with these objects. Do we want a monastic place, sort of a hypercard example in which we can come and think and talk to one another and other scholars, or can it all be done online? I'll stop there.
So I've been asked to talk about readers and authors, and I guess that means I have to deal with the question of the arrogance of the author. And I feel I'm probably qualified to do that. So I have two main points to make. The first is how astonishingly central to culture a text is, and how it's actually becoming more central. More people are writing down more stuff than ever, and it's absolutely a crucial part of how you express yourself now. You cannot exist through text messages, through social media, through Twitter, through Facebook. The way you define yourself is really, really heavily dependent on text. Obviously, there are images and other things as well, and what you're going to share. But you know, it's an amazingly central part of self-expression and self-definition now. And I think this is a I think this is a surprise. There's an idea called the Gutenberg parenthesis. And the idea was that we used to have an oral culture and everyone talked to each other. And then the printing press came along and then we wrote them down. And then I think this idea sort of goes back to the idea that TV and radio, the heyday of mass media in the 20th century, meant that we were returning to an oral culture. So we had this sort of interlude where we did print. And this is obviously complete rubbish because we're actually using text more and more, and voice calls, number of voice calls is diminishing. People are using text instead, and people are in effect journaling, writing down what they're doing on Twitter, on Facebook, and so on. So I think text is actually becoming more and more important. And I think instead of talking about a Gutenberg parenthesis, the parenthesis I'm interested in, and this is the subject of my next book, is what I call mass media parenthesis. And what we had before mass media, which really starts with the steam press and the penny press in the 1830s, was a culture where the difference between readers and authors was not as big as it became in the mass media era. So it wasn't the case that everyone could publish, but publishing wasn't that difficult. And you could go along to the print shop and say, print me some of these, and then you distribute them through your social media. And if you look at the early scribes in the ancient Near East, the readers and the writers are the same people, they're the same elite group. If you look at the first real media system in the Roman period, it's the Roman elite writing to each other on papyrus and sharing each other's speeches and books, and it's a real social media system. And what happens with the advent of the mass media is that the barriers to entry for authorship become much higher. You suddenly need to be able to invest in a steam press if you're going to take on one of the newspapers. Radio spectrum is expensive, radio towers are expensive, and so you get this concentration of authorship and control over the flow of information in a select band, of which I am one as a journalist and as an author. And the great thing we've seen in the past 10 years with the internet is that we've gone back to social way of media becoming interactive in two-way again. And I don't think this is new. I think this is just a return to the way things were in the pre-industrial era. And what this is doing is it's shrinking the distance between readers and authors back to I think the smallest it's ever been, because you have more widespread literacy and greater access to publishing tools we've ever had. And this is coming after a period where the difference between readers and authors is the biggest it's ever been, where you had a regional monopoly of newspaper, and those were the people who could decide what went into the newspaper, the people who wrote it. So I think we see this shrinking distance between readers and authors in lots and lots of ways. We see it in the democratization of publishing tools, most obviously. The fact that if you say something interesting on Twitter or post something interesting on YouTube, you could get millions of people watching your video of the tsunami or whatever it is. And so it's once again, on the scale of the mass media, it can actually take on the mass media and be as influential as the mass media can. Then you've also got, I think, lowering the barriers to entry for publishing. It's very interesting to see what's happening with book publishing at the moment. The definition of a book is in flux. And you write a 15,000-word essay. Well, you could have published that on a blog, but now you can publish it as a Kindle single, or you can make it into an e-book. There's lots of stuff you can do with it. And we're seeing these people appearing on Amazon who are making fortunes selling vampire novels for $1 each and things like that. But I think this is great that there's no longer this sort of gatekeeping to who is an author and who is not that used to be going on. But my favourite example, I'm afraid, is absolutely going to hate this one because it involves a closed proprietary platform that has a really clunky UI and very little interactivity. But it's the feature on the Kindle that allows readers to select the phrases that they are most struck by, they're most interested by. And when you browse a book on the Amazon website, it shows you which phrases in the book the readers found most interesting. And when I'm reading a book on the Kindle, or on the Kindle app on my iPhone, I can see underlined the phrases that really resonated with other readers. And the really funny thing is, if you're an author, you can see that. The readers are talking back to you through your own text. And I think that's amazing. I think that's just a huge shift. So essentially, I think the future of text for me is about, obviously, we've gone back to this two-way social, or more two-way and more social way of doing things. We have this shrinking difference and distance between readers and authors, and perhaps that will make us authors a bit less arrogant. Thank you. Deadline.
Tom raised an issue, comparing text to video and radio, and not to sound too geeky, but that made me think of the issue of bandwidth. One of the reasons I hate information in videos is that you can't search it, and you are constrained in the way so for instance, this piece of software I was using where I deleted everything, the installation manuals, most of the manuals were done as videos. So consequently, nobody uses them. Nobody uses them because nobody wants to sit and watch you move your cursor.
I think you've got a paradox here, which is on the one hand, video is a much, much higher bandwidth, there's much more information in a piece of video. But we grapple with this at The Economist in particular because we are about delivering concise analysis to people with not much time. And the best way to do it is text.
Absolutely.
Because you can scan it,
So it's high bandwidth in terms
video
of information
for us.
and low bandwidth in
Exactly.
terms of communicate of the technology.
But not always, because going back to what Vin said, he said sometimes he has to draw a picture to understand things. There are some things actually video is the best way to explain them. And trying to explain, how some machine works. Like
how you assemble something.
Yeah, exactly.
YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
Show me how this works.
IKEA must love YouTube, right? Because now no one looks at the instructions. They just go to YouTube and they go, I've got this kind of shelf, and the guy goes, okay, throw away the instructions. This is how you actually do it. And he shows you. And
but the crucial thing here, but I think that's exactly right, and it's all about horses for courses, to use the old cliche. And one of the things that drives me mad is we were talking about typography. Now, I'm not as much as a typography geek as you were, but I did used to read Letraset books in the 80s, so I can relate. And one of and also when I was starting out as a journalist, you used to have to learn things about typography. You needed to know how long the line should be in order for it to be readable, and how much of a space you needed to have between lines at a given point size and all that stuff. As far as I can see, even people who call themselves designers don't seem to know that anymore. because the barriers for calling yourself a designer, I guess, are so low. And so, but also look at Wired, right? I remember when Wired started back in, what was it, 91, 92. It was yellow text on an orange page on 6-point
It was
type,
unreadable
and it
and
was
proud,
this
though.
wide. Sorry?
It was unreadable and proud. It was all about 6-color press. Yeah, I agree. It was.
But this is the problem. It's about taking that cultural need to be cool and to be appropriate to the genre that you're trying to, what you're trying to express, but also having that little engineer in you thinking, is this going to work with my resolution? Is this going to work with my bandwidth? Is this going to work in terms of readability and looking at it at a distance and all that stuff? And that kind of discipline, which we kind of understood a bit, I mean, even sort of relative lay people like me, I'm not a designer, understood a bit of that in the 80s. Seems to me that even the people who are supposed to be experts...
The answer now is if you make your stuff hard to access and hard to read, then fewer people will read it. And ultimately, people want other people to read and interact and respond to their stuff. So if you do a bad job of it and you don't make your text resizable, people complain. And the great thing is now they can. You couldn't write a comment on a page of Word, but on their website you can go to this site.
On the issue of video, just before we go away, yes, it's useful for some cases or not, but it raises the question, what is information? For instance, there is at least 3 cameras here, including Ted's recording. And we also have the voice recorder here, which we're going to try with Drag and Dictate to get it automatically transparent. Well, it'll be
Voice of
interesting.
experience.
They charged me extra, so I'd like to know how it works. What's interesting is, why would anyone then watch the video? And that is not because of the explicit information on what you guys say. They want to see your character. You know, so that's just a whole different thing. And that's partly when we're talking about typography. When you read something, you get pleasure from beautiful type without necessarily thinking about it. And that's where we have to discuss the packaging of all this.
If we've got time, I mean, something I've recently seen both on YouTube and also on SoundCloud is the embedding of text in certain key points within a video or a piece of music.
At the most annoying point, right?
Which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, SoundCloud's great, isn't it? I mean, the ability to comment on a moment in a piece of audio, yeah, it's great. We haven't begun to figure out what to do with that yet.
Well, you guys are really going to like Luke's presentation. Any more questions on that?
The note that I made to myself, especially as I was looking at the typography material, I'm thinking about the process of rendering that which we read, and that the process is getting interestingly more complex and potentially dynamic and contextual. The idea that you create a thing which is fixed for all time, I think is shifting away now, because the moment that you're actually reading a piece of text, and I'll use the text in the sense that you were getting at before we had your language things, there's nothing that necessarily prevents you from having the body of software behind the rendered material that causes it to change over time. And I can't even imagine what this is going to be like, 15, 20, 100 years.
This is the books that talk to each other. It's even worse than that, though, because you can't really finish a book anymore. And this is a big problem for authors.
So you can't finish writing it?
No, if you can constantly update it, I suppose, and it's a bit of a fact to resubmit something to Amazon, but it's not going to be in 2 years, is it? And so I'm writing this book now, and it's going to be printed on paper and things like that. But I kind of can't help this. I can't escape from the idea. The amazing thing is how much stuff is on Google Books. I mean, 18th century French text, boom, it's all there. I can't escape from the feeling that this is the last book I'm going to do this way. And the big problem from the author's and the journalist's point of view is that we are denied the catharsis of publication. Because, and I feel this particularly strongly, because I used to run the back half of The Economist magazine, and so, we all kill ourselves on Wednesday and Thursday morning to get it ready. Then Thursday, it's too late, it's being printed, can't change it anymore, President of the US is assassinated, nothing you can do about it. And that's just hard life. And so it's great, so there's this great kind of, relaxation, and you get to have a drink, and Thursday night's the most relaxed night of the week, and then Friday morning you start all over again. Big problem now is I'm editor-in-chief of our website, and never stops. And you just never get the catharsis of publication. All you get is people saying, you've got to correct this, you've got to change that, you've got to update this. It's a pain in the arse.
In text, that's maybe a kind of a new issue, but with art, I mean, in a previous life when I studied art, I remember forgetting my I asked my teacher, what is art, all these discussions, blah, blah, blah. And she essentially just boiled it down to, it's whatever has a frame around it.
Oh, right.
Yeah, exactly. So if you put a book and then you have a lot of information coming in and out of it, beautiful, and it continues, but you still have that framed object. And there used to be a very fashionable talk about meditating. Again, get much information in there. You know, I'm all about interactivity and all that stuff. But if you can really contextualize your book, do the illustration, do all that, if you have external links and dialogue, that's beautiful. But if you don't keep that pressure...
My answer is to write history books, but then everything in the book is obsolete already. And, you know,
So this is really disturbing as from the point of view of a library, right? Because
you're just a cloud service provider.
yeah, so because they have a kind of atomicity to them, and this doesn't. And it's worse than that because not only is it a cloud service provider, but actually the bits are distributed and not in a good way necessarily. So beautiful, Kindle, fantastic phrases, communicating with the author, beautiful, wonderful. But what happens when that same book is available through Google or through whatever bricks and mortar bookstore still exists, right? You know, the half of the, it's like, it's not just the experience, it's the information that's embedded in it is now partitioned, right? In a way that's extremely difficult to put back together.
Chairman, I have to leave in a few minutes in order to catch Cara to Oxford. I wanted to make one observation about what I think we are now faced with. I want you to think back for a moment about what it was like to go from a scroll format to codex. That's random access scrolls, basically. And we established a practice in the codex in book form, which is pretty important for the indexing of information and the identification of where to find it. In this online environment, we are in a weak position by comparison. For example, if you use domain names and URLs to refer to things, they're not stable. They may not resolve in the future. Bob Kahn works on this with his handle system to try to have permanent identifiers that don't ever change, but you still have a problem mapping them to something that you can find and interpret. I have this slippery feeling that you have about the web page, about the production of content. We're moving from things that are fixed to things that are not necessarily fixed. That isn't necessarily bad, but I don't have a sense for what the right practices are to deal with this medium, which is more facile and slippery. So I think we're going to have to establish some practices that help us fix content in some way.
You have this fantastic project, or I think it was your project, the Web Archive, which as a journalist was just the most...
Brewster Kahle, that's not...
Brewster, oh sorry, I know Brewster Kahle, I knew
We're
that.
kind of like this. You know.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know Brewster Kahle, I've never met him in my life. But it was a fantastic project because, for instance, I was doing a story about the Templeton Foundation and how they've changed what they claim about...
Did they have a copy of your website which you crashed last night?
Oh,
Yeah.
try the Wayback Machine.
Yeah,
Maybe
well,
your
no,
website's there.
I think the Wayback Machine is finished now,
The Wayback Machine.
but I did use Google Cache. You saved me there. I actually got the cache of what my website used to look like when it was beautiful 3 days ago.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I run out the door and I wanted to
Oh, sorry.
get the last word in, and that is that you put your finger on a practice that we may need to refine, and that is the ability to snapshot things, to have the ability to say what did it look like at a certain time. Because without that, referencing becomes very difficult.
You also need to
change
change
and you're
history.
trying to refer to something that you read which isn't there anymore. It's not bound properly.
But it's also very dangerous because you can change history. So I get this with journalists who, they publish a story, it comes out of that week's Economist on Friday morning. We've had a nightmare of lots of news breaking on Fridays, and they say, can I go back into the story and change it? And I say, no, because the web page is a representation of the print article. If it's wrong, it's wrong. You can make a new one that's based on it and you've rewritten it, but you can't go back in and keep changing the story because that's breaking the rules that we have laid down for ourselves. But everyone is making up their own rules here.
Thank you very much. All right, we have our third and last session, which is very interactive.
hear my presentation?
Me too, and in Oxford.
Yeah, right.
Luke McCurden is our lead curator of Moving Image we'll be speaking, and Ted Nelson, author, visionary, and software designer. You may have heard the standing name. But first up is Helen.
Hello everyone, I'm Helen Hoxsey. I'm head of the Web Archive at the British Library. So the library has tried to preserve and archive UK websites since 2001, actually. This is the 10th year that since we have started Web Archive. We have a web archive, openly accessible, which is called the UK Web Archive. In there we have about 10,000 selected UK websites, which is less than 1% of the UK web domain. And we have over 37,000 instances, version of a certain website archived at a given point in time. In total, we're looking at 225 million URLs. That is 11 terabytes compressed archival data. And within that archive, approximately 65% is text, HTML, and a small percentage of these, there's also a small percentage of plain and CSS text. So what I'm going to show you is what we can do with this text in a web archiving context. So there's a current picture and a future picture. And I'm going to be brief and do some live demos, and hopefully things won't go wrong. At the moment, we have the UK Web Archive, which can be browsed by subjects, website titles, treasure collections. So we archive the web, we add metadata to them, we organize them, put them in bags, like a library traditionally would do. We also have full text search, which allows us to facet certain searches by date range, by subject, by special collections. We can also restrict the search to individual website or content type, date range, for example. Anybody who doesn't know what goji berry is, anyway, it's a superfood coming from China, but it was only in the last few years it was introduced in the UK. I did a little experiment here yesterday. I put the search term goji berry, and I started to click away the date range where the goji berry was not mentioned, or berries are mentioned, but in a different way, blackberry or raspberry, but not goji berry. And I actually found the first mention, at least based on the data set we have, in 2007. So I pretty much, if I had a comprehensive collection of the UK website, over time I'll be able to make a statement more accurately. But here I could say, possibly, goji berry was introduced into the UK in 2007. Matthew showed you the Google Ngram search. I would like to show you the Web Archive Ngram search live. So here's the UK Web Archive Ngram search. I would like to search two words, Obama and Bush, and see what happens. When these terms started to appear in the Web Archive, and how does that look like graphically? So here, I have to say this is based on the data we have, not how the web was or is. We see Obama, Mr. Obama, is mentioned less, and then sort of picked up from this point in time, May 2008. Sorry, that's not. And here.
Does that filter for, Bush in the forest, Bush? Does it have any content in it?
We have done some work just to filter out.
I'm just wondering why Bush is still so popular, because everybody hates him.
It really depends on what website we have archived, because we selectively archive websites, so there is some sort of distortion in terms of the data. But this is when Mr. Bush visited the UK. And I almost made the fatal mistake of showing this page at the Library of the Congress. Fortunately, I tested beforehand and said, better don't show that. So what that graph does, I think we showed something else. What that graph does is to take you actually to the actual page, which that term was heard. So just a quick idea of how Ngram works in the Web Archive context. We also have done some other things based on text analysis, but to visualize text. You know, these are the this is based on analysis we did on the website we've collected during the 2005 UK general election. So what were the terms or the things which the major political parties worry about? You know, Labour Party, Conservatives, and Lib Dems. What were the, you know, why are those so, you know, significant in this set of data? You know, I do have to say, again, I have to emphasize, we haven't got a comprehensive, you know, a collection of data. This is a selected website based on the definition we can get, but you get the idea. And swiftly, I would like to move to the future. What we're trying to do is to think, great, you know, we've done a reasonable job in collecting websites and trying to present them for references, organize them, you know, describe them like we usually do. But what we're trying to do, I think what we're trying to do is to empower the readers and researchers, trying to look at those not so obvious relationships, patterns and trends hidden in the data. So I've done some preliminary work. What I'm going to show you here is our development system. So this is not live, it's just available to ourselves. So I did the same search for Goji Berry. I can't see, imagine that for some legal or rights reasons you can't actually see the page. You know we have that page, web page, but I can't see the page as it is, or as it was on the web. But would this be helpful? In this page we have these concepts. At the moment they're linked to DBpedia and things like that. Our ambition is to link them to the name authority files and also tap into the open linked data world so that, you know, we virtually annotate the web archive with authoritative references. So we have concepts, we have entities, and, you know, so some of the name, you know, it's the right connection, right? Goji berry, healthy food, and you know, my key. And then keywords. And on the fly, we could also ask for a text analysis, the whole thing, with a screenshot of the web page, how it looked like. Is that helpful when you are restricted by, you know, in terms of if there are access restrictions? Do you get an idea of what the page is about? Yes, you do. Other things we have been experimenting with include, for example, also postcodes. You know, that's part of a specific type of text. We have scanned the UK Web Archive. We found 22 million postcodes mentioned there, and 2 million of them are distinct. However, at the moment, there are only 1.6 million official UK postcodes. What happened in the last 10 years to those 0.4 million postcodes? And also, why can't we have a user interface using postcodes as an entry point? You drill down to find the page where the particular postcode you are interested in is mentioned. So, taking consideration into time, I want to show you something else, which I think is cool, which gives you the real empowering feature. This is a Hive interface onto the web archive data. Don't worry about the technical details. What it is an interface which allows you to query the data, writing SQL-like queries. So our ambition, at the moment, we have some indexes in there, which allows to do certain queries, but the ambition in the future is to have all the text extracted from the web archive and put it in there and offer functions like this to researchers to find out the things they are interested in from the web archive. So I have some, I think the best is in the interest, I can execute this queries, it will take a couple of minutes, but I can go back to history and show some of the queries we did yesterday. So Welsh postcode, you know, the National Library of Wales work with us. They want to find out the pages relevant to Welsh postcode. You know, we have them here. It's all here. You know. And we did the MIME type. You know, I just said previously 65% HTML. How did I get that data? I run this query, MIME type here. This is the one I failed one because I was trying to do the percentage. I didn't get the syntax right. Anyway, here you get the idea. And what else can we do? Let's see. Save queries. Yeah, we tried Scotland postcode as well. And very interestingly, the Word and PDF query is very relevant to what we do in terms of identifying, government publications. We did all. Here's a list of all the PDFs in Word mentioned on a website which uses .gov.uk. For colleagues in catalogue acquisition and description, this is the content they're interested in. You can extract it out from the web archive. So I will not run the live query, but this is something we would like to work with researchers to understand how it can be done better. So I think I'll stop there because I'm running out of time.
Okay, I'll try and be brief. This is an image, it's some text. And the simple point is here that images, moving images, mean different things according to what we say about them. We need the word actually to explain what it is that we are seeing. Moving images are intuitively understood but explained by context. That doesn't necessarily mean that they can tell you truthfully what that image or moving image is about. Anyone who's a film archivist who watches historical television programs on TV watches them like this, and various claims are made for what the footage is denoting, and you know it denotes something very different indeed. But for the purposes of this event, we must assume the text strives to tell the truth. It doesn't always do so. What I want to talk about, there are many ways in which we can talk about video in relation to text. I'm interested in talking about search and discovery, particularly integrated search and discovery, which is the British Library Game, so that we can offer researchers a fully integrated multimedia experience where no one medium is privileged over another. So a parity of media. And for that, for the traditional film or television data, catalogue data is not enough. It's one remove from what you're actually seeing, what you're actually experiencing. It tends to boil down a description. But what we want, as far as possible, is the words themselves. Once you grab such words, obviously there's the meaning there itself. You can convert them into keywords. You can link to the thesaurus. You can identify preferred terms. We talked already about hypertext, terms of translation, and so on and so forth. You can just grab the text. And then it's text you're either capturing through discovery, you just want to search and find that particular point in the video, or you want text that produces your transcription. I want words taken from that file, so like I have something to tell you what that video is actually about. And there are various methods to choose this. The ones I'm going to talk about are subtitle capture, and speech to text. There are others, obviously there's the long-winded way, transcription, increasingly as people using crowdsourcing methods to get many people involved in transcribing videos, or some combinations of these. Subtitle search is something we've been looking at, particularly in the British Library, with our test video system called Video Server. Particularly it's been focused on BBC content, is now 100% of all BBC television programmes come with subtitles. You'll know most, obviously, if you use CFAX and type in 888, and the subtitles again. Many television channels have a lot of subtitles, including a lot of 24-hour news channels that we've been capturing, which leads to my next slide. I'll just show you how it works. Video Server. It's going to do a reading on the service in the next few minutes. So here we are. This is one of the television news programmes on the 26th of July 2011. BBC Evening News. I turn off auto scrolling. Play.
This is BBC News. The headlines at 6 o'clock. The Education Secretary warns teachers their reputations could be at risk if they join planned strikes this week.
Let's to the talks, and let's not have the sort of militancy that will disturb. But what I do want to emphasise is that the public, I think, have a very low tolerance for anything that disrupts their hard work.
So, quickly move away, but you get the basic idea. What it's doing is not capturing text as graphic. We talked about the iPad taking us back in time to text essentially as image. They are images, they're bitmaps. They need to be converted by a central process in OCR to uncertain text. But it is possible to use now existing screen to take those and start to make resources. You can some type of search. I mean, it's still in its infancy. You can actually play it on the internet. You know the site Hulu. You can't see Hulu's programs on the site here, but so you can't see what it is. So I type in the name I prepared earlier. So this is a web TV site in the States. Haven't quite got to the UK yet. And here are all the programs on Hulu, and because I've got various channels, and where the word phone can appear and at which point. And if I could play their programs in the UK, I can then click that and take you to that exact point. You're going to get this in your TV sets coming from next year, when the first internet TV services start coming, particularly YouView, which is the BBC, BT, Channel 4, so a range of broadcasters and telecoms companies.
Louder, please.
There's a range of, so YouView is the BBC, British Telecom, TalkTalk, Channel 4, ITV, a range of broadcasters and telecom companies coming together to create this essentially bring together web and broadcast TV. And one of the services that will feature will be subtitled search, because we know they're playing with it. This is from the BBC's R&D site, where they are taking subtitles, identifying keywords from it, and then linking these to hyperlinks from DBpedia.
Do you have any thoughts on how to prevent spoilers? Let's say you're searching for something within a drama, and then in the search results you have people saying what the killer was.
I have to say, I haven't
It may be a case where you don't want all that.
So this is the application running on the live feed from News 24, and you can see that we're pulling in the live subtitles from over an IRC channel down here. We're pushing these off to a natural language processing API, which returns related DBpedia terms, and we're listing these over the top of the EMP here, which scrolls up as you go along. We've then mapped these DBpedia terms to BBC.UK news content. So if a term comes up that I'm interested in, say job seekers allowance, I can see these links here, which would.
Now this obviously you wouldn't want that all over your screen. This is a test. It's clearly for YouView's service. It will start to be another internet TV service. Google TV has the ability to do it, it doesn't offer it yet as a service. And then leads to the interrelated service that we've also been experimenting with, speech to text, which is where you take the audio file and automatically convert it into text. A lot of work has been going on in different development labs. And that's generally seen argued a 70% accuracy rate. We've been working in our Growing Knowledge exhibition, which closed recently. We worked with Microsoft's Mavis system, which essentially captures the text and then matches it to a pre-existing database of words. If it's a word it recognises, it'll reproduce it in your transcript. If it doesn't recognise it, it won't give it to you. It also does rather sort of over-clever things. It tries to turn everything into a recognisable sentence, and sometimes changes prepositions, things to make a logical sentence. I just kind of wave of hand to put on there, so I'm just going to show you one example. Maybe it's in action. This is Science Cinema website. Science Cinema website. It is searching. And it's then searching across pre-indexed. And there we are. Here we have word text. Praise, because it appears exactly that what you do.
And the Archimedes text on bottom. But there were also limits.
If you want to go and obviously that's, and find that on the Microsoft research site. Or finally, take a look at Democracy Live, which is on the BBC website, at the bottom of the news page, using links and autonomy software to combine a bit of speech to text, and a bit of obviously using Hansard to be able to search word for word across everything that says said in Parliament and House of Lords. And here's the title of what this word from last year, and every time the word which live is mentioned in the text.
Does anyone have any questions or said the last speakers? Would you like to?
So we're recording this on a little device behind you. We're going to try to do the recognition and then matching it up with the cameras will be interesting. So it's personally nice to see that at least someone's having success with it.
Obviously, a lot depends on whether people speak loudly and clearly, whether they have really received pronunciation. It struggles with different language, different accents. It has more than one person speaking, but it's happy with a single voice speaking directly into the
How does
microphone.
that system work? You showed a picture of a guy in front of the microphone in.
What's actually happening there? That's the BBC's system, a company called Red Bee Media, who provide subtitles to the BBC. They actually do it through a mixture of speech to text and subtitles. So I've actually stared at the image, what the hell is he actually going on? Why is he needing a microphone? Because they take in the audio file, it creates a rough speech to text transcription. It then corrects the subtitles, essentially somebody typing thereafter. Which is why if you look at 888, you'll sometimes see like golden where it's being corrected a lot way.
Also, just a very quick technical question. I thought you said that you were actually taking you were doing OCR on the subtitles on the video rather than taking the 888 feed itself?
It's like this, yes.
But why?
You're taking an image of text and converting it into the letters to be recognized text.
Is that because that's what 888 is feeding you? It's
Yes.
not feeding you text, it's
Not
actually
feeding
feeding...
text, it's feeding,
It's
as it comes to the broadcast signal, the signal, the DVB, it comes as a bitstream. The other way to do it is obviously to go directly to the people with the keyboards and take the data from there. But it can go along different ways where you can. Ultimately, it's not being created. The subtitles are not being created automatically. They're being created by those people still sitting there typing.
Okay. Well, I'm terribly disappointed because I wrote this talk to prevent surf. I don't know where I had a,
Just checking that you're being recorded.
I had a vision in 1960, and as the world has veered further and further away from the way I envisioned computers developing, I've gotten angrier and angrier, but continued without stinting to continue to try to develop things the way I think they should be. I coined the word hypertext, and to me hypertext is not, pardon me, the web is a trivial form of text. Just for the record, here's an interesting picture. It's kind of blurred. I don't know. I just got this this new Windows machine. It's called a MacBook Air. And this is slightly blurred, but it's, I believe, the first picture representing the computer, the modern personal computer, as I thought it would be in 1968, with a screen. That was the new idea. A screen with pictures, a loudspeaker for music and sound, a tablet, a piano keyboard, a postal scale, and various push buttons. I left out the standard keyboard just to be mischievous. But the point is, at that time, I don't think anyone else was foreseeing a personal computer of that scope. But that's not what it was about. What I foresaw was, my vision was of a world where everybody could publish and everybody could read and write. Everybody could read and write and publish and read each other's writings without the intermediary of a publishing company. I come from a line of self-publishers. My grandmother was a self-publisher, my great-grandfather was a self-publisher, and I'm a self-publisher, not because I couldn't find a conventional publisher for my books, but if self-publishing was good enough for Sam Coleridge and T.E. Lawrence, it's good enough for me, because that way you get creative control of the ideas. So, what kind of hypertext? Oh, yes. I'll just wave. Could you wave the copy of Possiplex, my dear? I want to especially thank my partner, Marlene Mallicoat, for wafting me through the last 20 years, assuring my it's in the larger pocket, assuring my continued presence on the planet. The larger pocket at the time. Okay, well, maybe it's not there. So, yeah, I published an autobiography last year called Possiplex, which you can get from Lulu or Amazon or whatever. I get much more money to buy from Lulu. In any case, I'll read you just one quote from it. Quote, "There is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things." Niccolo Machiavelli. And that has certainly been true, because I mistook I mistook a clear view for a short distance, and I thought that what I envisioned was so obvious that it would naturally come about, and yet other people's variations on the concept were so great that that's not how it worked out. Okay, I will try to get out of this application, and get out of this thing. Yes, okay, now, to the other one. Yes, it has, of course, disappeared.
DLC.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So let's talk about hypertext the way I see it. Here we have a hypertext of 11 pages. That is one document. It is divided into pages for the convenience of the reader. The red connections or pink connections are transclusions, and the blue connections are links. These have nothing to do with the links of HTML, because you can see both ends of them at the same time. They're visible. And well, let's start at the front with the two opening pages. So this document begins here, and of course there's only one visualization of it. One of the questions I asked beginning in 1960 was, if we're going to have interactive texts, what can we have that is not the simulation of paper? How can we go beyond the simulation of paper? By God, today all we have is the simulation of paper, PDF, Microsoft Word, the World Wide Web, all simulations of paper. Why? To me, that is like the buggy whip sockets on the first horseless carriages. We imitate the past rather than seeing the possibility of the future. So, what can we have that is interactive on the screen? Well, one of the things we can have is have every quotation connected to its original source. And people say, how can that possibly be? Well, here it is. And this is, of course, a simulation, but this quotation, in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. And there we are, King James Bible. There's the original source. And I think that better interaction here is a little wonky. I'm going to shut this down, start it up again. Works. No, sorry. Yeah. So, kill. Okay, anyway, so it's out of focus. But anyway, here's another quote. Adam and Lilith immediately began to fight. So how do we go to that quotation and see its original context? Well, we can step down, and it's not working. And I'm in VMware. So that is, I shouldn't have used the
Can I ask a
Wi-Fi
question about that?
Yes.
Just how can you know what the original context was?
Because it's right there on the screen.
Well, because you programmed it in.
Because it was transcluded from the original. We don't copy or paste in this system, we transclude, meaning it is meaning that the representation of that portion of the content is reproduced in the virtual document being created. And so that connection is maintained because they're both pointing at the same original. The document is, let's explain it in terms of movies. Today when you make a movie, every frame is given an absolute address. You edit the movie, and you come up with what is called an edit decision list. This is a list of all the addresses of all the shots that you want to see in the final production. So now, these are taken to a big machine in the sky, and then the shots are copied beautifully onto the final. So, we could use this method for all movies. Suppose, hypothetically, that we put all the frames of all the movies out there on the net and made them, of course, instantly accessible with no server delay. Now, we could see any movie as a combination being a list, an edit decision list of pointers to that particular sequence you wanted to see. That, then, is the method we use for text.
I understand. Okay, I understand.
So that we assign every piece of content an absolute address. We never change content. We only append.
That's right. That's right. And using words like never means discipline. And so
we're talking about software.
What you're talking about is I think it would be, as someone who has to teach students how not to plagiarize, I think that level of discipline would be great.
It's not just about discipline, it's about how the software works. When the software works. The prototype, I'm stuck in prototype hell. But in any case, the point is that in this system, you do not have the option of, quote, copy or duplicate or paste. You have the option of transclude. And that then creates the edit decision list, which brings the portions of the different pieces together. And that is how the system works. Now, this is as I say, a prototype. Unfortunately, for some reason, it's not working. I wonder whether I should try to restart it. Yes, I'll take the chance of trying to restart it if you want to keep up a dialogue while we attempt this. By the way, this right here is the latest version. The one you saw was so complicated that the developer could actually not make it work any further. It's now being pried apart by two programmers in Connecticut, and we're hoping to make it work. And here's a movie that I just received last night, of the newest version, which I called Xanadesk. The previous one was called Xanadu Space. Xanadesk, we hope, will be distributable sometime really soon. It's in Flash. The one you just saw is in OpenGL. But the idea is to have one common database system, one common document representation system, which will be portable among all of these. The proprietary name is Xanadu. The open definition will be called transliterature. So that basically, to publish a transliterary document, you publish three things. You publish the original content and continually appended to so that no addresses ever change. And then any version you wish to distribute is a list of that content and how to put it together. All the links then are overlaid. Links markup, everything else is overlaid. So that the content, the source content is clean always. It does not have the embedded markup of HTML. It is rather clean content which can be reused in many other contexts and with many other links and many other forms of markup, because these are overlays rather than embedments. So that's the format. Whether it whether it will catch on at this time of life, everything has gone wrong. I'm going to shut down, restart, and see what happens. Because
Ted, do you want to do the movie first?
I can't do the movie unless I restart. But the movie is only showing. See, the concept that is hard for people to understand is transclusion, because we're so used to copy and paste. What people call technology. Let's talk about the myth of technology. The word technology, as it is usually used, refers not to technology, refers to constructs and packaging. Okay? Radio waves and radio antennas, those are technology. But this thing here, the iPhone, packaging. Yes, it's got a radio in it. Yes, it's got all those things. But it's been carefully crafted to give you a lot of functions which are what you see. And those are the constructs of the world. And then the package that gloss on top of it. Why is the iPhone brilliant? Because Steve Jobs truly knows the heart and mind of the user. Whereas Bill Gates at least knows what a user is.
So why are you
And the
using
Linux
Windows?
people don't have a clue. What was your question?
Why are you using Windows on a MacBook Air?
I don't
That's
like
just
either of them, my
sacrilege.
dear. I hate them both, okay? We're talking about convenience.
You hate it.
Pardon?
You hate it, both of them equally.
Different days are different. This is looking better. Okay, don't need a network. So here we're in VLC, and I'm trying to find the controller. Start, stop button. Play. Okay, so basically we're seeing here, he's showing us, this is John Murray in California. He's an instructor. He's a graduate student at University of California at Santa Cruz. He's very brilliant. And he's a Flash instructor. And he's showing us how transclusions will work in this version of Xanadu. And so now here we're seeing the same paragraph taken from the Telltale Heart, and the transclusion beams showing as removed the source document, which has the red headline around the blue document, which is showing a transcluded copy. This is just special effects, but it's very important because you see the issue with all software is a combination of representation and presentation. The mind of the user is equally a part of all of the issues. I will see now. I'll stop this, and I will try again to stop the damn thing. Okay, now we'll try to get back onto Xanadu space. Oh no, sorry. I'm jittery. I'm sitting in the back while everything else happens. There we go. Okay, so here we are. Here we are in what looks like a clean copy of Xanadu space, and it's still, yes, good. It usually works better than this on this machine. So I just got it last week, and therefore I'm still finding out what to do. But what I'm trying to show you, people ask how we can possibly manage thousands of interconnections and finding our way among thousands of interconnections, because something like HTML does not allow overlapping connections, does not allow two-way connections, does not allow three-way connections, does not allow hardly anything. But the real issue is in the greater world, where we have really a whole lot of connections, how do we manage them? And the answer is, this should be smoother. The answer is we step through them one at a time. So right now, I'm stepping up to the top. Oh, it seems to be backward. That's great. I'm trying to step, I would like to be able to show you the different transclusions as we go side by side. So right here, demonstratus. Stepping through these successively will bring up the different source documents as they swoop to position, and we're not seeing it all. Oh yeah, there we go. So now as I step through the Right now, we're seeing in the left-hand document, the left-hand page of this hypertext, we're seeing the successive transclusions. They're the pink. So right now, this one says, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, on the left in the transclusion, and on the right in the source. So I'll step over to the source document, and then you can see in the King James Bible. This is, of course, a simulation. I'm not bringing the whole Bible. Now we go to the next one. Adam and Lilith immediately began to fight. Some of you know who Lilith is, and there she is in her source document. Now we step back and step on through, watching the other sources come side by side with the individual links and the individual transclusions. So the question then is how we can envision all these things. This particular demo, Xanadu Space, shows you some of the particular ways in which we can begin to view these things. Now, there are two systems. One of these is in Flash and the other is in OpenGL. Those are the two graphical platforms which allow the kind of visualization and motion that we need. You may ask, what has all this to do with HTML? What has all this got to do with HTML? And the answer is absolutely nothing.
Isn't HTML5 the best way to render this now?
That's what they say.
Unfortunately.
That's what they say. They say HTML5 will be better. We're not there yet, but really soon now, I've heard the phrase real soon now for 50 years. And
just call it JavaScript, because when people say HTML5 they really mean JavaScript.
Exactly.
It's just a display language.
The worst language in the computer field, which also happens to be the
2 years ago.
also happens to be the governing language of Splash. So there we are. But the point is that I do not believe that HTML5 will overcome the jitteriness problems, because it always has to garbage collect. It always has to run off on errands of its own, and the kind of smooth performance that you really want is probably not going to be there, but I don't know. Anyway, I want personally nothing to do with HTML. I have wasted 15 years of my life trying to compromise with HTML, and that's it, baby. So the point is, this is a, what we're talking about is creating another format and another kind of viewer that, like, shall we say, the PDF viewer will show a different kind of format. But let us consider that every other format is a representation of paper, which forces everything into rectangularity, limits the connectivity, and essentially is fetishizing typefaces. Now, I love typefaces as much as any other person, but they should not govern us. That is like canopic jars for the guts of mummies. The point is that we don't want it's cosmetics instead of medicine. Fonts are used to represent relationships. Let us really represent the relationships as relationships and not doll them up as two-dimensional fonts. Yes.
But can I just say, so can we thank you for... and maybe we can take, sort of open up for points to discussion and so on, but addressing sort of the full set.
Just a small comment. Ted, you just summed up the whole day when you said, let's represent the relationships. I mean, you could take the definition that information itself is relationships. And
well, relationships between things, so you need things also.
Yes, so that was really key. Thank you for that.
The other point, I'd like to speak to something that has continually come up. There's been a lot of knocking of authors lately here, and saying that the author shouldn't have control. I hold to a two-God system, okay? I'm a dualist. My religion is human creativity, and I have two gods. God the author and God the reader. God the author has absolute right to present things to the last scintilla of precision, in exactly the way they should appear. And then God the reader has the right to throw the book across the room, tear it to pieces, annotate it, and reuse the content in any way whatsoever. And that seems to me the ideal marriage.